And we are back for the Areo Hotah II Q&A video. Preston, what's up? How was this one? Was this one a difficult one or very smooth?
It was more difficult than I thought it would be. Hotah, I always kind of think that Hotah is going to be simpler because his language is simpler. But eventually you get so used to George's regular writing style that actually going back down to Hotah is difficult, because most of the points of view are very similar to each other. Like the difference between Tyrion and Jaime is not actually that much, or the difference between Jon Con and Tyrion is not actually that much, like how poetic a sentence is. But when you get to Hotah is an utterly different writing style from everybody else. Like even the children, like Arya and Sansa and Bran, are more poetic and in a different style than Hotah. Hotah is very unique, but it was still it took longer, but it was still a fun. I really had a good time with this chapter. It was much more fun than I thought it would be. Just the dialogue was more playful and everything. And so I really liked that. I know that like Hotah is not the character that most people are interested in. But now I'm really attached to Hotah. I actually think that like I'm more attached to fanfiction Hotah than real Ice and Fire Hotah, just because there's not much written on like real Ice and Fire Hotah. Well, like fanfiction Hotah actually has a personality and a background and is doing things, so so I'm really happy with the chapter. But I can understand that it's Hotah is not everybody's cup of tea.
I was about to say that because people were waiting for your take on the Battle of Ice, which for those of you who don't know is the conflict between Stannis and the Boltons, the Battle of Fire with the stuff going on in the Marine, and the Battle of Blood with Euron's raid on the Reach. People were waiting for all this stuff, and you're getting there. I think maybe.
Oh, I mean, I can tell like enthusiasm, like just going with the Jon Con Arianne chapters. Like already, there's like submissions rolling in because people are pumped and excited about the Battle of Steel, the battle at Storm's End, and that kind of stuff. So I understand like different people have different foci, and it's Hotah is a niche thing, but I think people are getting more pumped about other stuff. So we'll get to everything eventually. But I love me some Hotah now.
I have to say though, before we start, just one comment from me is whoever wrote the line that Darkstar utters about I'm deadliest during Starlight, was that it?
Yes.
That was
one of the editors. It was pretty perfect.
This is not a dig at the editor. It's just a dig at the character for saying that. It's probably one of the most lamest line in Ice and Fire. It's so edge.
What's so awesome, right? It's so awesome.
So cringe. Such an edgelord thing to say. And
because in a sense, it's almost very fandom, because like the fandom is really hates Darkstar and thinks he's cringe, like because of his lines.
Very
like,
meta.
I'm Darkstar and I'm of the night, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if did George really intend for Darkstar to be so lame, like for people to call him Dorkstar and stuff like that. I don't know. But the line. I'm deadliest by starlight. I don't know if we're gonna get a better Darkstar line, so we're gonna hope.
Well, it got me thinking of what the best line in the books is, and it has to be Euron's godless quote. For people who don't know, Euron has this little speech because someone calls him ungodly. In the show it happens too, but it's a little less epic. But in the books he says, I have heard the prayers in 100 tongues. Cure my withered leg, make the maiden love me, grant me a healthy son, save me, make me wealthy, protect me from mine enemies, protect me from the darkness, protect me from the horse lords, from the slavers, from the sellswords at my door. He laughed. Godless. Why, Aeron, I am the godliest man to ever raise sail. You serve one god, but I have served 10,000. From Ib to Ashai, when men see my sails, they pray. Easily the best speech in the books by far.
It's hard for a character to pump themselves up. I understand that this is like rap battle kind of stuff where people can pump themselves up and be arrogant. But, in the circle of people I grew up in, I always thought that was lame. Like you never say how awesome you are, because that means you're not awesome. Like why would a confident, awesome person need to like tell everybody how awesome he is? It's so insecure and everything. So how to tactfully do it, or do it in a to say you're awesome is very difficult. Which is why like Darkstar just doesn't come off great, because he's telling everybody how awesome he is.
But Euron knocked it out of the park.
Right, yeah. So Euron, is able to pull it off.
That's just the coolest line. But
yeah.
So let's get on to the chapter. I got some comments from the comments section of the chapter. I noticed you replied to this one person who asked, "Who even decide who gets to be the Sword of the Morning?" Which, yeah, that's a good question. Who does decide that? And you said it was the Council of Daynes.
Yeah, I think it comes from... I think the actual solution to it is not written in any... I forget if it's actually in the World of Ice and Fire or not, but I know that somebody had asked George R. R. Martin at an event, like how what is Sword of the Morning and where does it come from? And George said like, oh, it means like, there's like an election or something. And then, because the a lot of the World of Ice and Fire comes from the So Spake Martin stuff, that maybe he put that it was in that as well. I'm forgetting if it's in the World of Ice and Fire. Oh yeah, no, it's coming from, I can actually bring it up right now. So in November 29th, 2005, this is how random things are with Sword of the Morning, because so little is actually written about the Daynes in the book. But he said the same guy asked about the Daynes and the Sword of the Morning, asking how that title is decided. George said that the Sword of the Morning is always a member of House Dayne, someone who is deemed worthy of wielding Dawn as decided within the house, that whoever it is would have to earn the right to wield it. So essentially it's some sort of, I don't know if it's, he says it's decided. I don't know if it's a democratic rule or who gets to decide. Maybe the Lord of Starfall gets to decide. Maybe it's a democracy. It's not really clear, but it's decided within the house that whoever is considered worthy gets the sword. Now, knowing that, what's interesting is that Darkstar doesn't think that Arthur Dayne was worthy, which is interesting, right? That's a very interesting thing, because people think Arthur Dayne is this incredible fighter, and he kind of questions that, but is it just being a great fighter, or do you have to be sort of a good person on top of it? There is some evidence that Arthur Dayne was not a great person. For example, when he's fighting, I think the Smiling Knight, he kind of is torturing the Smiling Knight. Like he could easily kill the guy off, and he's like continues the fight, just kind of torturing him. Or the fact that he's supporting Rhaegar, the theory is, and I tend to believe it, that Rhaegar was trying to usurp his father, or at least call a small council to have his father kicked out, and for him to take control of the throne early. And Arthur Dayne was supporting him, so in a sense he's somewhat of a traitor. So going on to this theory. So there's a possibility. Darkstar certainly doesn't think Arthur Dayne was worthy. And so there might the process for choosing Sword of the Morning might be flawed, and so we in the fan fiction we kind of included this idea that that Darkstar wanted to be Sword of the Morning, but he was excluded for some reason, for some mystery reason, and he's bitter about it because he thinks he's the best fighter and worthy, and yet he was not voted that. So we thought that would be an interesting backstory for him to create a little bitterness, little chip on his shoulder.
The next comment I have here, I love all of these so far, but some of the prose in this chapter could use a second pass. Whoever's in charge at King's Landing sounds modern and idiomatic. Just sounded like Preston talking normally. It would be better to say whoever rules in King's Landing or whoever sits the Iron Throne, but that's just one example. So this person here does not like how you guys wrote it, but you replied to this person saying that it goes over several passes.
Oh, I mean, to say it needs a second pass is like ridiculous. Like this is, I mean, we're talking dozens of passes over a week. You know, like 6 or 7, like I have 6 editors and me, like painstakingly going over this over and over and over again. Each one of them puts in so much work. I put in so much work. We read over this a million times. Well, not a million, but dozens and dozens of times to say like a second pass. There isn't, not to say that there isn't stuff we occasionally miss. For instance, like even though we reviewed it so dozens and dozens of times, like during the Elaine sample chapter, we whiffed and missed that Kevin was regent instead of hand, you know, and like nobody caught it, you know, and stuff seeps through. But that particular line, like, it's not that I don't disagree that it sounds a little modern, but those are words George says. Like, he does use whoever, and he does use in charge. And the alternatives would be like, sit the throne is not accurate because neither Kevin or Cersei are sitting the throne. You could say ruling, maybe. It's a little more ambiguous because keep in mind, Tommen is the king. So it's not that I you know, maybe one could say like someone's rules. You know, I don't disagree that it sounds modern, but George does use a lot of words that sound modern, especially in Hotah chapters, though this is from Darkstar's mouth, admittedly. So it's, you know, like there's another point where we talk about finding a maester. Like, finding a maester is one where it's always find a maester rather than seek out a maester, or like, you know, it seems like the proper thing would just be to be like, we need to seek out a maester or you know, look to a maester or something, but it's just like find a maester. Like, George is really weird where like all of a sudden he'll use a modern phrase. And then other things are archaic. It's kind of random. So it's not that I don't disagree that line maybe sounds a bit modern, but I think it's certainly passable. I mean, he's probably the only person that was completely taken out by that particular line. Like, you know, yeah, like if you know, if someone pointed it out to me and said, oh, we should shift this, maybe I'd shift it. It's not that I don't disagree, but it's like, it's such a random thing to be critical about. I mean, of all the things, I mean, there's a lot of things we screw up in it. There's a lot, you know, nothing's ever perfect, right? But like that line, like, come on, like, it seems like a pretty small thing.
This one
Anyway.
person asks, how set back is the Dornish master plan by all this? I'm willing to accept a lot of this was all as Doran planned, but Areo disobeying clearly isn't one of them.
So we're still a little ambiguous on what Doran's master plan is at this point. I think if we're really going with what Doran's plan is, I would say that, okay, he sends off Obarosand, who wants war, and to deal with Darkstar. So she knew that there was going to be some conflict. You know, he definitely wanted the Daynes to look like bad people so that, you know, he could get them out. And I think in the grand scheme of things, if you know about like the Dornish master plan, Doran wants Roynish restoration, and the Daynes don't really count as Roynar. You know, like, they're not real Dornish. They're not Dornish enough. You know, would probably be like the excuse. You know, the Ironwoods aren't Dornish enough. You know, they're not Roynish enough. And so he's looking to like depower them at minimum, and you know, at least cause conflict. I don't think it's necessarily a huge aspect of the Dornish master plan, because I think the Dornish master plan is essentially about trying to bring in Dornish law, and have the Rhoynar be restored. And so it's like Obara was important into trying to create conflict with the Daynes. But he can recover. He can recover. Now, I think the thing that's a bigger screw up, the thing that's going to cause more harm, is that Hotah has gone rogue. That Hotah is not his pawn anymore. I think that's something he's not expecting. That Hotah was somebody he could really count on and rely on, and that's going to be something. Then there's the idea of Myrcella being gone, and that messing up his plan. I think Doran probably thinks that he can recover by using Rosamund, but it's certainly not. It's certainly not what he planned. I think Ares Oakheart one-upped Doran. I think Darkstar and Hotah going a little rogue or outside of Doran's plans. I think that Doran, probably thinks this is recoverable, but they're annoyances probably to his big Dornish master plan. Not to give too much away, but yeah, even though that's a lot I just gave away, but yeah, I think these are annoyances, but he probably thinks he's still on track.
You have another criticism here that I picked out, because I do kind of wonder this as well about the main series specifically. This one person says, white ravens are rarer than black ones. Therefore, I highly doubt they would be sent to castles as minor as High Hermitage. A major castle can easily pass on announcements to vassal lords through a regular black raven or a rider. But I know, you needed this white raven for plot convenience.
No, I mean, and I talked this through with this poster as well, and I think I had him come around in the end. Because white ravens are rare doesn't mean you would then not send them to minor castles. In a sense, it's harder to set up the black ravens, the more common ravens, at smaller castles than it is the white ravens, and that's because the black ravens, you need several black ravens for every castle. And then that's just in Oldtown, for Oldtown to communicate with the location. And then that location needs dozens and dozens of ravens for its own communication. So say you're a random, say you're Deepwood Motte, okay? Deepwood Motte you're going to need 5 or so, I don't know, 3 to 5 Deepwood Motte ravens at the Citadel. And then Deepwood Motte's going to need 3 to 5 black ravens at Deepwood Motte. But then Deepwood Motte's going to need a raven for the Wall. It's going to need ravens for King's Landing. It's going to need ravens for Winterfell. It's probably going to need a few ravens for all the other places in the north. It's going to need a Torrance Square. It's going to need a Dreadfort. It's going to need a White Harbor. And then who knows, is it also going to have ravens to go to the other, to the Eyrie and to Sunspear and to River Run? Doubtful that Torrance Square would have a raven that would go to, say, Acorn Hill. It's doubtful it's going to be something random like that. There's not going to be a direct Acorn Hill Deepwood Motte route. But, you'd think that they would have ravens to go to different routes for communication. And that's a lot of black ravens, a lot for every castle. And there's going to be, hundreds of castles. So, with a white raven, you essentially just need one. You need one white raven for each location at the Citadel, and that's all you need. The location doesn't need any white ravens. And so in the end, you only need, the Citadel only needs, a few hundred white ravens, while they need thousands of black ravens to deal with that. And in fact, I think it's in Fire and Blood, they mention that when the white ravens went out, the number, and I think they said in Fire and Blood that it's 300 white ravens. And so if you do your list of the top 300 locations in Westeros down, I think High Hermitage would make that list of top 300. It might not be in the top 100, but it's going to be in the top 300.
I would love for some random
I
person to make that list of like the 300 places those white, because someone has to. Someone's got to do that work, and hopefully someone will.
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, it's probably, I mean, 300 is probably, I'm sure George has named about 200 locations, in the writing. If I'm just thinking, I'm just taking the number, like 7 kingdoms, is there about 25 locations that we know about in each of the 7 kingdoms, and then and then maybe you pick a few minor houses, like how many houses, and then I think you could probably get to 300. 300 is probably the right number.
Whoever does this massive task, make sure for the meme that Lonely Light is the number 300. Where the White Raven goes. It's the last one. This one guy, the other guy deleted his comment. I was trying to find it, but it's basically the same thing.
Well, if he deleted it, he probably didn't want to talk.
Too bad, because you replied to his ass. Too bad. It's gonna get on here. 5 guys defending a whole castle is too few to be realistic, unless the castle is typically abandoned. Hotah could have taken them all by himself, lest in a 2v5 situation. So you know what I'm talking about? The other guy replied something similar, and you replied like why you think headcanon is like, you know what I'm talking about?
So no, in general I made a joke about somebody was saying like, they totally saw like Darkstar and Land and High Hermitage having more people, and I kind of made a joke like, it's too bad it's too bad my headcanon didn't match your headcanon. Like, nothing is written about High Hermitage at all. Like, we know nothing about the place. So now the question is like, about 5 people, is that too few? Well, the idea in my mind when I wrote 5 people was, one, he's a landed knight, and then we establish in the chapter that he has pretty poor land, and so he doesn't have that much money. But then also, like, the banners have been called, and so some people are off in the Prince's Past and the Boneway as well. And then the idea is that Darkstar is also a fugitive, so people would have abandoned him. Somebody else made a much better point than all of that, and that is, in the Sworn Sword, Eustace Osgray had like 2 guys, and he was a landed knight. And I was like, oh, right. So George already established like that some landed knights are really poor and only have like 2 guys. So now, is that realistic? I probably not, would that even ever happen in history? Probably not. But George has already had it in the story that Eustace Osgray, a landed knight, had like 2 people defending his castle. So, defending his keep. So it's there. But yeah, it's I imagine there's still some people like have to like run the castle, old ladies to like, take out the chamber.
So someone also commented like they have no maester. Shouldn't every major location like this have a maester, even small ones?
Well, no. I mean, if the Citadel doesn't feel like that it needs to send a maester someplace, there wouldn't be a maester, right? It's just what the Citadel decides.
So the Citadel decides that High Hermitage should know about winter is coming, but not have a maester.
If you have the Raven that's already trained to go to High Hermitage, and it's been trained like for years to do that, but you just don't have a human being to like go off to be at High Hermitage, then that would be kind of the situation, right? Yeah. I mean, right? There's lots of situations where you kind of have one mechanism in place for something, but another mechanism is not there due to shortages. I mean, like, I can open up my printer and like I've got plenty of magenta, but I don't have any cyan. We've all been there, right? Like, I don't think once Darkstar gets to the point where he's just like too poor to or just doesn't have enough people, or like he's never there. Like, the Citadel just decides, what's the point? Well, feeding a white raven at the Citadel doesn't take any time. Of course, I don't know how these white ravens are actually trained. Like, how do you convince a white raven like to go to a location he's never been? It's pretty crazy to think about the training of white ravens. Like, do you just just tell them like direction wise, like where to go?
It's magic or time traveling Bran is what I'll chalk it up to. By the way, I love how people say like a 2v5 situation. It's not like anime where just because a guy is super strong or very skilled, he can take on multiple fighters. And in Storm of Swords, doesn't the Hound take on like two dudes, but is like really injured after the fight?
Yeah. When he's at the end at the crossroads, he fights the Tickler.
Who's it, Polliver? Yeah.
Polliver?
And like, I'm pretty sure the Hound is more skilled and stronger than those two guys, but yet he still got messed up just from fighting, just from like a 2v1 situation. So I'm pretty sure that, Areo and Dalt could not probably take on everybody in the castle.
Well, I mean, there's just like luck and stuff like that. But I mean, these turns out in the end, these guys were old, but Hotah didn't know that. He thought he was told by Darkstar that there were just as many inside. He assumed that there were 40 like well-bodied people inside, or he wanted to believe.
Does Hotah's question, where do Septas go, herald any further parallels between him and Tyrion in terms of social status, skills, significance, and sheer size? They seem extremely distinct characters. Is that incongruity intentional?
The incongruity obviously is intentional, but obviously Hotah is the complete opposite of Tyrion, right? Tyrion is this guy who's very clever and small, and Hotah is this guy that's huge, and Tyrion is but at the same time their questions relate to each other, are very integral in the sense that when Tyrion is talking about, when he says like where do whores go, he's talking about like where do the disposable women of Westerosi society go. We kind of know where the disposable men of society go. We know they go to the Night's Watch. We know that they become broken men. We know that they become sellswords. We know that they become sometimes hedge knights. We know that they become bandits and or maesters. There's a million ways to deal with the disposable men. But what do you do? Where do the disposable women go? Because not every woman is marriageable alliance material that brings honor to your house. Like you've got all these extra women, and we know that a lot of these women become sex workers. And so that's the question. Like Tysha became this disposable girl. Like what happens to her? Where does she go? The assumption that Tyrion and his father make is like wherever whores go. They assume that Tysha has become a whore. That was her path as a disposable woman, to become a sex worker. But of course, we also know that one of the paths for disposable women in Westeros is to become a septa, or become a silent sister. We know that the faith is another way that people deal with disposable women. And so it's a fun thing. I think that Hotah and Darkstar are heading to a location where septas are, where disposable women are. And there's a lot we're going to explore what the life of a septa is like, what a convent or a nunnery is like in Westeros, and like what these female orders are like. And we might run into Tysha. You never know. So it's something I definitely thought about. And it seems kind of blunt, like, oh, did this come out of nowhere? Well, it doesn't really come out of nowhere, because the last chapter is about Septa Eglantine and searching for her. But it is an exploration of women. It's going to be an exploration of women in this society, and it relates to Tyrion's like question, like, because they're essentially the same question, and the question is, where do disposable women go? So that's what I was thinking about anyway.
Next question here is, the Swan, Cyrax, Vagar confusion of history was something you've borrowed from Dance, with some additional Aemon Brynden confusion. What motivates the confusion of history as a recurring motif in your version of Winds? And is this revenge for Elaine and Sweet Robin getting the Winged Knight / Artis Aaron confused?
I hadn't thought of the Winged Knight Artis Aaron thing. That might be a different issue. Like, so in Ice and Fire proper, the Winged Knight is Artis Aaron, but then in the world of Ice and Fire, they retcon it to a different character, and they separate them as like the Falcon Knight and the Winged Knight. And I actually like found this really confusing, and so I messaged Elio and asked him, like, did you come up with this? And he's like, no, that was totally George. I was like, okay, that's just weird, right? Like, okay, it's just a odd retcon. But anyway, that's another thing. Now, when it comes to like what thematically about like why I've been like putting in so much confusion. So when I looked at the title Winds of Winter, I thought back to the first use of Words Are Wind in Ice and Fire. The Maester Pylos says to Davos, words are wind, and you can use that wind to blow the sails of Stannis's cause, or something like that. I have to look up the exact quote. Hold on a second, because it's somewhat important. He says, the Maester laughed. There you have it. My words are wind, and you've blown mine away with your good sense. His Grace knows what he has in you, I think. And he says, onions. So it's interesting. After that, the metaphor words are wind kind of became, words mean nothing. Even though like the first time he was using the metaphor as actually like words being powerful wind that can cause quite an effect on things. So in a sense, the first usage of words are wind is the exact opposite of all subsequent uses of words are wind. Like when normally people say words are wind, they're saying words are meaningless. They're wind. What else do you have? Pylos is actually like saying the exact opposite. He's saying that words are actually very powerful. They're the wind that can actually like blow people and affect change. And so when I thought about the title of Winds of Winter, I thought about it in that sense, like words and communication is really important, and it affects things, and it can change things, and confusion can really change things as well. So, when I thought about that, I was, and this gets into like the White Raven and what we've been doing with the White Raven, and the simple words, John Beware, and how John Beware can affect so much in a story. And here Darkstar essentially saves himself and causes Areo Hotah to surrender with words, And so I was really thinking about that like in that Winds of Winter is referring to the words are wind, but that like words have power to them when they're believed. And so like all these stories are going to be about confusion of information and what that does, and stories and how they affect people, and stuff like that. And rather than just like concrete actions on the ground. So yeah, there's all sorts of confusion, because communication is often about confusion, and confusion, even though these are words, this confusing wind which is kind of like a storm, you know, a whipping wind around can really kind of mess things up. So that's what I was really thinking about, like that, you know, that communication as a confusing storm that's going to like knock the pieces around on the map. And so, but he's right in that confusion is definitely a major motif so far of these chapters. You know, like everyone be confused, like misunderstanding history, thinking these names are talking about somebody else. Like it's been happening over and over again, right? Like who's the one-eyed kinslayer, and he messes it up. John being messed up. Elaine listening to those maesters and hearing these different names and just messing him up completely, not understanding what's going on. And so this is definitely one of those things that is intentional, and I'm glad somebody caught it. You know, that this was an overarching theme of what I was going for. But yeah, it had to do with the title and Winds of Winter. Because I was hoping, yeah, you've heard my rant about how like a Game of Thrones and A Feast for Crows are fantastic names for novels. Meanwhile, A Clash of Kings, A Storm of Swords, and A Dance with Dragons are kind of just phoning it in. We've talked about we've talked about that.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think they're all really good names for novels, but then again, for fantasy novels, sure. A Clash of Kings is at least descriptive of what happens in the story. You know, at least that's descriptive. But I think the worst one is A Storm of Swords. I think that's the worst title because it just doesn't mean like all of the books are about a storm of swords. Like, but this time for real though, like really a really big storm.
I guess so. That's the worst one. I mean, at least with the Dance with Dragons, the dragons actually start doing stuff, you know? I mean, I guess they did some stuff in A Storm of Swords where they burned Krasny's and got Danny the army. But it's not really the best, like, event-wise, A Dance with Dragons should really be about Danny versus Aegon and, like, some actual dragon battles, but... oh well. It's not the most appropriately named book. You know, A Dance with Dragons, a book mainly about a dude freezing at Winterfell and trying to escape, and a dwarf on a long on a ship, like a bunch of dudes on ships is really what A Dance with Dragons is about. Some armies freezing in the north and a bunch of dudes on ships.
Next question here is: having lost Obara before Oldtown, do you plan on expanding on why she was so eager to burn it to the ground?
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that. I mean, it's going to be a brief thing, but it's going to come up on when, because you know they're heading to Oldtown. And it's we're going to have some crossover with. What, you know, it's just because it's fun when characters come together, especially characters who normally don't interact. And so it's going to be fun to have Hotah, Sam, and Aeron in the same location, you know, and having those stories cross over some, because these are three characters we totally didn't think about together, right? Aeron, Sam, and Hotah, like. Who would have thought?
Maybe Alaris,
you know, like
throw him in there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like she's part of the story, and Jock and Hagar, and the Brave Companions, and Euron. All of these people are in the same place, and it's gonna be an awesome mixture of you know little jambalaya, you know. So that's what's great. It's great. It's so fun when characters that normally have never, you know, have not interacted before, like come together, like Arion and John Con, you know. So it's gonna be fun. So,
but the Darkstar's bluff successfully confounded Areo, but that probably isn't the hardest thing to do. That prompts the question of whether this was part of Doran's plan. 2 chapters into Hotah, do you feel Doran would be pleased or frustrated with his progress? You kind of answered this earlier, but
yeah, I think Doran is going to be a little frustrated. I think Doran is underestimating Hotah. Like, I think Hotah is someone that he's going to think is stupid and obedient, and that that, I mean, on a fairly simplistic level, you send Obara Sand, this completely unstable individual, to deal with Darkstar. You're gonna have a big conflict. Blood is gonna spill. That had to be Doran's plan. That had to be what Doran was thinking when he sent off Obara. Like, why would you let such an unstable person like lead a trip? So, did he expect that she would kill Balon? I think he did. I think he did expect that she would kill Balon. I don't think Doran expected that Balon would have cracked her ribs and caused so much trouble, and I don't think he was expecting like Areo Hotah to have a kind of moral awakening. So I think that's what he didn't expect, But he definitely expected conflict. He definitely expected some people to die. Because, I mean, why else? It's like, you're going to take the most unstable character, Obara Sand, and then you're going to tell Obara that Balon Swan was going to murder Trystane, and then you put him on a road trip, and you're like, bye-bye, and then you send him, oh yeah, and by the way, you're going to accuse Darkstar of a crime you didn't commit. Okay. Sounds like a recipe for it's a recipe for disaster, and Doran must have realized that it was a recipe for disaster, but it was a disaster in a different way.
Next question here is, Darkstar admits that he was not able to follow through with his threat of sending messages of war, but was it your intent for him to sound like he was aware of dragon means war means wait, or should we be aware of that, as it's from an Ariane chapter?
Yeah, that was just a little inside joke. I actually forgot. So I did my review of going over the chapter, and actually I missed this one. I forgot about it. I think I did. I think I forgot about it. But yeah, no, that was definitely a reference to war means wait. So in the Ariane chapters, Doran creates a code for his armies in the Prince's Pass and the Boneway, and that code is war means wait, but dragon means war. So what I came up with was like, that's just a little joke. It was an inside joke. Like, Darkstar doesn't know the code, but had he even sent it off, had he even been successful, or had Hotah known about the code, they would have known that war means wait. So it would have done nothing, right? They would have gotten this they would have gotten this message that said wait. That said war, and they would have waited and done nothing. Like, that was kind of a joke. But it also makes one think, like it was also meant to remind people that the White Raven, if you remember, if we're talking about the opening line of the prologue, is it Daenerys or dragons? But it's dragons in there. Like, one of the messages on the White Raven's wings is dragon, and so it's also a reminder of that, and like the potential danger that the White Raven is going to screw things up with dragon. Yeah. So
next question here is, many were glad to see Illyria's inclusion in this chapter. Am I saying that name right? Illyria? I'm saying it right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't care about pronunciation, but yeah, Illyria Dayne.
Yes, even without a physical appearance, they're happy that she was in the chapter. Do you plan on the last daughter of Starfall making an appearance, or perhaps her nephew, the young Lord Edric? Isn't Edric with the Brotherhood?
Edric was last seen with the Brotherhood. We don't really know exactly where he is. I have a theory that they're hanging out. So the Brotherhood splits in two factions. And we only know that the Brotherhood splits in two factions because of the appendix in A Feast for Crows. No one mentions any sort of split in story at all. So in the split, Beric Dondarrion, who is listed as dead, is leading one branch, while Lady Stoneheart is leading the other branch. And so the branch that Beric Dondarrion is leading has Edric Dayne in it, the Mad Huntsman, who we last saw trying to get food with Greenbeard, I think, in the Reach, Anguy the Archer, and then a bunch of characters that some of them we've never seen before. Merritt O'Moontown, Waddy the Miller, Swampy Meg, John O'Nutton. Nothing like some of these characters, like Swampy Meg, has never been mentioned. Like where she came from, we don't know. John O'Nutton, never mentioned before. Waddy the Miller, he is in A Storm of Swords. And Merrick O'Moontown is also in A Storm of Swords. But like those last two characters, not like Swampy Meg and John O'Nutton, never appear, and yet they're part of Beric Dondarrion's band. So it seems that there's two factions, and Edric Dayne is with one faction. But we're definitely going to, in the future, deal with the two factions of the Brotherhood Without Banners, and like why the split happens. Like we can kind of feel that the split happens because there's probably a moral difference, like the Lady Stoneheart's group started focusing on killing Freys, while maybe the Beric Dondarrion group has different intentions. But the fact that there's a woman named Swampy Meg in it, makes us think that maybe they're in a swamp. Maybe they're in the neck. But Swampy Meg might be some sort of vulgar joke that George R. Martin is making. So I don't know. So who knows? But I'd like to have Illyria appear and have but I don't I have to think about whether or not any characters are going to pass through Starfall soon, or maybe Hotah will on his way back to Sunspear. But yes, but they'll be in it. I mean, at least Edric's positively going to be in it. Edric Dayne is positively. I'm going to try to have Starfall and Illyria appear. So we shall see. We shall see.
Next question here. When Darkstar referred to the bowmen on crates as my little girls, was that intended as girls of his household or bastards of his own blood? Is this the beginning of new sand stars now that the sand snakes have begun dying off?
It was something that I did not think about it like that. Not that I'd be necessarily opposed to it, and maybe it's best to leave it ambiguous. But the idea was that was in my head was that they were from this. The Daynes were just from this area. Like people in this area would look like Daynes. The Daynes were first men. They might have been practicing Lord's Right to the First Night along many hundreds, thousands of years ago before it got banned. And the small folk in the area would have these special genes from the Daynes. I didn't think about Darkstar himself doing this, but I don't know if it's in Darkstar's personality to have sex with the locals' daughters, but maybe. I don't know. I mean, I didn't think about it. That was not my intention. It was a whole like history of House Dayne being really old and having these old traditions. Like I was trying to make a lot of creepy parallels to, the original intention of High Hermitage was that there was going to be a bunch of creepy parallels to Bloodraven. Because you're going like Bloodraven is in a hermit's hole. Like he's a hermit. And this was a reference. So like I tried to put like the ancient like oily stones to show that High Hermitage was super old. I had Bloodraven purposely mentioned, instead of Aemond. Just like Bran when he goes to Bloodraven's cave, he thinks he's running into Arya. Hotah is running into Tansy, and he thinks it's Arya, but he thinks it's Myrcella. Like, there's all sorts of these parallels to Bloodraven's cave that's there. And so because it's like old and creepy and stuff like that, and Darkstar only taking girls and having girls is supposed to remind us of Craster only having women, or Darkstar taking the girls is similar to the others taking the boys. All these things, I thought about when putting that environment in. In the end, it didn't end up feeling very creepy because the Knight of Lemonwood and Darkstar are pretty funny characters, and but that the intention was that it was this big connection to like old, ancient, creepy like customs of like that we find in those northern chapters around like the Night Fort and such. But so they would be the product of that, the Lord's right to the first night and all of that.
Next question here is, how do you imagine Areo Hotah's journey tying into the Whiter Winds' wider themes?
Well, so Areo Hotah, so we got to think about, and I'm giving away a lot of the plot, but you got to think that like, okay, if Areo Hotah's like journey is trying to find Myrcella, because he seems, that's pretty given away that at the end of the story, like he wants to find Myrcella and he's letting Darkstar in on this. We have to say, okay, well, if something happens to Tommen and Myrcella becomes the heir, she's a very important character. Like she's the queen. And Cersei would have Rosamund in her hand instead. And it's kind of a very similar situation to Jane Poole and Arya in the north. But Hotah is going to have the real heir to the Seven Kingdoms there. I mean, the real heir. I mean, if you ignore like Dany and the fact that Myrcella's a bastard and all sorts of things like that, but nonetheless, like or Stannis being the she's a claimant. She's an important claimant. She could be considered like queen. And so it's not some random thing where he's like just searching for someone that's not important. He's going to be searching for somebody that's very, very important. Now, thematically as well, like Hotah, like Brienne, is exploring, deeper questions of morality and honor, and stuff that's, very, very important for the entire theme of the book, like beyond anything else, Like when you really look at like characters like say Arya, like Arya's like, yeah, that's like, Arya's a cool character. She's got a lot of crazy stuff going on with regards to the Faceless Men and stuff. But at the same time, like from Arya, do you learn anything like prescriptive about what George R. Martin believes about the world and how we should live? No, she's a cautionary tale of the exact opposite. Like we don't want to be like Arya, right? Like Hotah and Brienne and maybe Bran have to be like stories where we get into, the actual like prescriptive solution to saving Westeros. So in a sense, like he's the most important character, or Brienne is the most important character because she's actually the one that's prescriptive. But but he definitely relates. He's really, really important. Areo Hotah, at least in my I don't know what George is going to plan, but at least in this fan fiction, Areo Hotah is very, very, very important. So we'll see how it goes.
And final question here is, now that he's made his first appearance in the project, the biggest question surrounding Darkstar can finally be asked, do you intend for him to be the Great Other?
No. I don't intend Darkstar to be any sort of Great Other. Darkstar, Darkstar is he's more he's more of a, like, if we're really talking about like how I see him and how I perceive him more like a Hyle Hunt character, like a character who's actually a pretty good person. Like he has his faults, but fundamentally a pretty good person. Like not perfect. Definitely has edge to them, but an actual protagonist, like somebody that's good enough in this world. I don't see Darkstar as a villain. Darkstar is going to be a good character. I mean, an anti-hero at least going forward. Someone that we're going to care about, rather than just some evil piece of shit that most of our characters are. But no, I don't see him as a Great Other. I see Darkstar as a fairly good character, more or less.
And that's all for all the comments and questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you for collecting these questions, and thank you for all the people that asked them. These were interesting questions, hard questions.
It seems like 2023 is going to be a big year for the fanfic. And I don't mean to be an asshole when I say this, but hopefully George finally announces Winds of Winter, because even if he does, I feel as though you're a YouTuber. YouTubers are going to YouTube. Even if he does announce the Winds of Winter and it comes out, all you're really going to do is, I'm hoping you're going to do this, is take the released Winds of Winter and the stuff from the fanfic and see where you guys match up.
Yeah, that's going to be some fun stuff. I mean, obviously, best case scenario, George publishes the book, George comes out with the book, and then we'll have so much stuff to talk about. We can go through these chapters. We can do analysis, we can do theories. There's so much can happen if the book gets released. It's going to be a fun time.
It's taken us 2 years to get through Fire and Blood. It's going to take how long do you think it's going to take us to get through fucking Winds of Winter?
Oh God, I mean, years. It would take us years. I mean, even if we focused on one chapter per week, like, that wouldn't be enough, right? It would take us years to get through.
Oh shit!
It's gonna be a fun time.
Reminds me of that Simpsons episode. Remember that Simpsons clip show episode where at the very end, "Have no fear, we've got stories for years." Reminds me of that. Oh shit!
Yeah. It was a lie. Simpsons didn't have that many stories.
But no, Preston, do you mind if we wrap it up here?
Sure thing.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.